Hi, folks, and welcome back to another EDGEy conversation. It's another day with the EDGE staff team, so we're pretty excited today to talk a little bit about a pretty big topic. I know we won't cover all of the facets and nuance around it, but our invitation or our query today is to think about, what does sabotage look like? And so there's a lot to grapple with in this topic, and I think maybe what's most helpful for us is to kind of have some communal language or shared language around this topic. So I'll start us off by just posing the question, like, what does sabotage mean to you? What do we mean when we talk about the word sabotage in the context of our communities, or how we approach that specific term individually, because it's a pretty loaded topic. So I'll head over to Tom first, and then we'll see where we go.
Thanks, Zoe. For me, the term sabotage and the work that I do involves anything that we do that reduces our ability to execute efficiently. And I know that that's a fairly broad, and remember that my lens is usually a technological one in these conversations. So I'm, thinking about all the times that we want to bring about change, and maybe that involves technology, maybe it just involves sort of organizations and people, but it's sort of, what are the things that we do either out of self-preservation, out of fear, or out of lack of knowledge that inhibit our ability to bring about the change, the end result that we were looking to do. That's sort of my perspective on it.
Yeah, I think that that resonates a lot with me, and I think from what I heard in yours, what I'm kind of trying to work out for myself right now is, sometimes I think sabotage is unintentional. Like, we don't even know that we're doing it, or that that's a particular blocker that we're putting up in our conversations or in our ways of being. And so I think for you, that piece you said at the end about just how does it reduce our capacity to get to the outcome? That's a really helpful framing for me.
I think a lot about sabotage in terms of fear. And so thinking that sabotage is kind of an externalization of an internal fear that somebody has, and whether or not that it's one-to-one, like directly related, or if it's not, that doesn't quite matter. It's just that I find that a lot of things around negative emotions or negative relationships end up being mirrors for the self. So there's something about sabotage that for the person who is doing the sabotaging, or the community, or whoever it ends up being, that it's a mirror of fear that's being expressed individually or communally in a particular setting.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page too, although, because I think in the normal, I looked up the word when we were preparing for today, and it does really kind of infer intentionality. And I think there is some kind of intention, but when we're talking about a condition of fear, it's not always conscious or self-aware. And so I like, both Tom and Alexandra's comments, and yours too, Zoe, around anything that seems to be putting stumbling blocks in front of what is a clear path. If you share a certain viewpoint, right? And even when you share that, like self-sabotage. But I don't want to eliminate the intentional sabotage too. We're a community that's passionate about what we do and feel it's important. And sometimes when people are heading in the wrong direction, it seems important to stop them. And so, but what seems to be common to all that is his sense of not quite on the table. Like sabotage is covert. And the covert is either lack of self-awareness, or really what your motivations are, or just tripping something out because you disagree with it intentionally, but not really being forthright with the people that are doing it. And so, yeah, all of those things. Not a comfortable topic.
Rob, as you were talking, it also reminded me that there's a certain degree of sabotage that's around this need for control. So like, you know, if something is happening and it's kind of going in a direction that's beyond your control or beyond your like safe zone or something like that, then that fear and control kind of work together. I think also there's sabotage that can like sabotage someone from something negative into something positive as well. So sabotage itself doesn't always have to be something awful, but like you could say sabotage could be an intervention for someone who has like an issue of some sort that needs an intervention, or you know, something like really just something that's trying to say, okay, well, this is the path that you're going on and I'm gonna like kind of steamroll you and push you in a different path. And so sometimes like they might be something that's you know, negative, but it also might push someone into something that's more positive, because the sabotage, I think, is in opposition to whatever the original intention is. So if the original intention was something that was negative or self-harming to yourself or your community, then that sabotage could be something that's more positive too.
I wanted to react to something that Rob had said, in terms of the putting obstacles into a path that was otherwise clear. And I think that resonates with me. I see a lot of sabotage as being the result of a lack of clarity, not seeing just how clear that path is and overcomplicating things. And I think that's something that we do a lot personally and as congregations, is we make the problem bigger than it needs to be. And whereas the path could be quite straightforward, and then you start to get all these different sort of complications that then make it feel like, oh, this is really tough to get done, and then sometimes it never does actually get done.
Yeah, and I think I'm starting to hear this link between like self-preservation and a scarcity way of thinking or understanding what's happening, and sabotage, and how these three might come together to create something that is that really is this stumbling block. It's like I'm trying to preserve what I know and what feels safe and comfortable, and I'm really worried that there's not enough, or that if I don't hold tight to the only thing I have, then everything's going to disappear. And this accumulates in this place of like, I'm just going to put up as many blocks as I can to keep me in this place.
Yeah, this is really helpful. And I think the one thing I want to say is, number one, sabotage is rampant right now in the ways we've been describing. Like, this isn't just a theoretical conversation around what we understand sabotage to be. It's rampant, and I think it's also helpful to put it across, like, and it comes out of fear, and especially when you're working in change, you know, all kinds of things, and time and bogged down with process can be ways of doing that, like a process that just never ends. We all know the story of the 16 committee and board meetings necessary to pick the color of the paint for the bathroom or whatever, you know, and the person that was volunteering to do it quits by the time, you know, it happens. But there's also, you know, we hold that intention with the United Church of Canada understands the importance of process, and especially as a relational organization, as EDGEy, we also are aware that, you know, that kind of relational approach sometimes takes time and so on. So there are some things like, so a white supremacist organization has time poverty as kind of a characteristic, because you don't want to take time to think too deeply about things, because it might require you to do a lot of change. So sometimes things are perceived as sabotage that are actually necessary. So I think I just kind of lift up that other side, because it's a discernment, right? Like, yeah, sometimes roadblocks, I guess Alexandra was kind of referencing this. Sometimes roadblocks need to be put up in order to look at something, right, that we don't want to look at. I'm not sure if that's even sabotage, but it can seem like sabotage.
Yeah, Robin, what you're just saying, I just like had this big shift all of a sudden, thinking about too the ways in which, like, you said sabotage is rampant, which I completely agree with, and I think is like systemically built into some of our institutions. Like, you just said that piece about like white supremacy, and I'm like, oh, it's not even a, like, there is of course this piece of like all of us bringing sabotaging behaviors to the table. And then there's this like overarching system that is built to sort of disenfranchise or put these roadblocks in place for certain voices or for certain groups.
I've been reflecting recently how the busyness mindset is really a sabotaging mindset. Like just this idea that we can always do more and have more, and like we've gone from email and now we have messaging services, and then we have, you know, like there's always just this idea that we can just keep adding. And it, in many ways, it means that we aren't able to do anything or even think. Like even what I'm hearing here is like take the time to really think about things or discern them or talk to the people we need to talk to, make sure the right people are at the table, like any of these things that then end up sabotaging what we're working on or what we're hoping to achieve with others. And I think that that's just something I've been struck by as I intentionally am trying to allow myself to focus, realizing how many times like I have sabotaged myself by just being like, yes, of course I can do these 1,000 things in one day, and not be realistic about like, no, I can do 3 things or 4 things today, right? Like it's, and do them well. So I just think it's interesting. And then, yeah, I think sabotage often feels like when you also get a whole bunch of questions about like, well, how is this practically going to work? Of course, we're for the idea, but how is this actually going to work? And is it actually reasonable? And those, again, I think are the questions that sometimes really need to be asked and considered. So I think it's like that openness, if there's an openness to actually exploring a new option, or if it's just questions to slow down or just, you know, highlight how impossible something actually is. So yeah, that can feel, it undermines.
Yeah, and Bronwyn, I think you've nicely led us into another place that we might explore today that I was kind of thinking about is like when are we noticing sabotaging is happening, or what are the conditions? And I think you've kind of alluded to this, like what are the conditions that help sabotage or the sabotage mindset thrive?
I'm still pondering that last little twist because I think that's a really interesting one. But I'm still struck by what Bronwyn said, probably because I see myself very clearly in that sort of busy work kind of mentality. And recent experience over the last 9 months has shown me that I really need to sort of de-scope my expectations around a lot of what can be achieved. In order to actually achieve a few things in a meaningful way, as opposed to just checking off a bunch of to-do lists and check boxes. So I just wanted to respond to that as a very helpful reminder that in order to get things done, you need to give yourself the space. Rather, you can get things done in the sense of checking off boxes, but to approach something that takes a bit more thought and a little bit more space to grow into and intentionality, that's where you really need to sort of lose that busy work mindset. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I love the question about conditions and so on. And you know, there's a whole list that came to mind for me, and I'm trying to sort out what's at the root of it. Because a lack of communication, like this idea that sabotage doesn't happen in the open at the table, happens in the background often, right? Happens side conversations. And so lack of transparency, lack of communication. But why does that happen? Lack of trust, lack of common cause, lack of a relational, you know, in EDGEy, we often talk about, you know, the mindset shift. And like if your objectives are the main thing, then people don't matter so much. So it doesn't help build trust. Like, you know, and I'm big on objectives. I just think building trust and relating to people is the way to get there. But you know, in this kind of objective worldview or the mechanistic modern worldview, it doesn't foster that. But so I think transparency, a sense of authentic relationship, like being able to confront each other with our differences and knowing that that's okay. So safe to be different is really critical around preventing, because these are all things like trust, communication, a sense of common cause, a sense of valuing each other. These are things that create a sense of safety and dissipate fear. And if fear is kind of driving sabotage, then, not having that's going to be a condition of making it, enabling it.
Yeah, I really want to pick up on that communication piece. I feel as if a lot of sabotage is just very subversive. It doesn't happen within direct conflict between people, but it happens in our perception of what reactions might be, or in our perception of what reality might be. So really opening up that communication channel to be like, okay, well, in my mind, I have this particular project. It involves person A, B, and C, and I believe that person B might have this sort of objection. Therefore, I'm not going to offer this project forward because I feel like it'll be a big objection or something like that. And it's like, well, but that's not even happening truly within the reality of that relationship. It's just happening within our perception of what the relationship is, and not within that real space. So be really being able to maintain that relational way of being and open up the way that we have our communication, so that when there are moments of even perceived conflict or perceived dissent or something like that, then maybe the other person's like, no, that's not a problem at all, or you framed this really well, and I'm totally up for it. But without having that conversation to just double check, then you've already guarded and self-sabotaged in that moment. I think also a lot of permission in all of the spaces in church and in communities of faith, it's who has the authority to make decisions about what? And who do we point to say this person or this group or this committee or this regional council or general council or whatever has the authority to make a decision of something I don't have the authority to make the decision. So then therefore we kind of relieve ourselves from the ability to participate in the system for whatever reason. But that also means that we're that's kind of sitting in that perception versus reality space as well. Maybe it's that, you need to contact or look at the manual and see what's written there around this particular issue, or maybe it's that you need to be in touch with somebody, but some of that is nerve-wracking, but that initial permission giving or that authority around whether or not you can make decisions or be able to move things forward also ends up being this big sabotage space. And you can see that happening in all sorts of volunteer spaces, and also in networks and coalitions of people that come together where they're okay, we all want to do this thing. And then it comes to the moment where you're well, here's the actual work and the time that it takes and the dedication that you have to this project. And then a whole bunch of people step away. They're well, I don't know if I have the authority to say that I can second my work to this. I don't know if I have the ability to prioritize this in this particular way. But again, a lot of that is perception. And then a lot of that is just kind of understanding what our relationship is to whatever that outcome is. So anyway, I will leave it there.
There's a lot to unpack. I feel like I want to go back and listen to that part 3 more times, because there was a lot. You touched on assumptions, just the power of, or the danger of assumptions, and how that can lead to self-sabotage or just saying no. But also, I think you were talking about this permission piece, and I think to me that points to sort of almost there's a loss of agency, which is going to result in a loss of momentum, and I think that points to a culture, maybe a hierarchical culture, as opposed to a culture of experimentation. When everyone's empowered to do small, iterative experiments and measure how they work, there's less risk and you don't need as much permission. But when you look at, okay, we're going to strip all the pews out of a church, That's a massive undertaking. It requires a lot of money. There's going to be a lot of thinking that goes into that, and a lot of people getting. So how do you iterate? How do you reduce the scope of what you want to do next? Because planning it out is assuming that you can actually engineer that and figure out how to do it. But we over engineer so much, it becomes this complicated thing. And when we look at what Rob was saying about it's usually just a very clear path forward. It is if you keep the scope really narrow and just say, what do we want to experiment? What do we want to identify here? Here's a hypothesis. I feel empowered to take a small group of like-minded people and go and give that a shot. The risk is minimized. The requirement for permission is minimized, and we'll get some results, we'll get some data, and then we can reconvene and make the next leap and the next leap and the next leap. And that's how things move forward. And I think the sabotage can also just come from making a job more complicated than it needs to be, or thinking about this massive end goal, and that's going to require just a lot of debate and a lot of conversation. But can we just iterate and just do things a little bit more rapidly?
Yeah, and I think like I heard it for sure in what you were saying there, Tom, and a bit in what you said to Alexandra around this piece of like feeling like you have the authority or permission to move forward and to dream pretty big on some of these things, I think is rooted in what Rob was talking around trust. And it can't just be the sort of perception of trust while other things are happening in the background that would indicate a true lack of trust. But it's really in this place of like genuine trust that everyone is working together for this common good piece. And if that's the lens or the mindset that we're approaching it from, then it's sort of, it's this freedom that like you do have the permission to make the decision or to go forward because we trust that you are doing it in the way that makes sense or in a way that fits with our overarching way of being. So yeah, I think I'm hearing this piece around communication and around trust is all part of this bigger piece around folks feeling really empowered to move forward with their ideas or their plans, and that those things those are antithetical to sabotaging mindsets. Bronwyn, I think you said that the mindset of sabotage, that's just like my brain is like the mindset of sabotage it's really standing out for me. And so
there are a number of things that we often talk about that I think are enablers of sabotage, and one is a no until we're right mindset. So, in a time of change like this, where there's so many questions and so much liminal space, that if you want to wait until you get it right before you say or do anything, you're going to be stopping everything from happening, just everything, right? So that that kind of comes into it. I really like the image, and I think it was Tom's used it a couple of times, or maybe I started, but Tom's referenced around a clear path, and that kind of this for me is like how not to sabotage, right? It's like to keep the path clear, and we've talked a little bit on both sides of being sabotaged and being saboteurs of ourselves. And it's always, I have a spiritual mentor that often points up here to me and says, it's enemy territory, Rob, don't go there alone. So that, not to get caught in our own, what Alexandra was talking about, our own imagination or assumptions around what's happening. So the only part of the path I can really keep clear is my own, right? Try and keep my own sabotage out of the path. Keep my own assumptions, talk to someone, have the conversation. If I'm fearful, the dread set, what am I afraid of really? If there's trust issues, well, how do you then build trust and so on? And maybe that takes time, and that's another piece. But yeah, I like that. Keep the path clear, and like what's the garbage you've left there?
One of the things I do try to remember is we've had the I've had the odd meeting with Rob where somebody's brought something where it feels like we're being sabotaged, or somebody else is being sabotaged, or there's a roadblock or an issue. And sometimes Rob has quite surprised me by saying, yes, that's great news. And I go, what are you talking about? And it's actually the sign that like something is changing or something is shifting. Either people see that there's enough energy for an actual cultural shift, that the reaction is to either sabotage or throw up a roadblock or stop the progress. And I think what the celebration is that there's actually progress, like something is shifting that's scaring people. And I that said, I do think we always have to take the time to like discern whether it's a good shift or not, or like whether it's, it's because something's moving the way we want it to. But I think that also does sort of celebrate the fact that if we're doing real change work, if we're really changing mindsets or inviting, and I say it's as though it's something we do, if together our mindset is shifting, and there's change happening, like a community or a cultural change happening, it's really scary. And that's sometimes when the sabotage does emerge, and that we need to then almost embrace it, I guess, and like work through it, like identify what it's symbolizing. But yeah, so I think that's been a fabulous mind shift for me to experience and to explore, right? Like, oh, this means what's exciting is that something is shifting. So hopefully it's the right things, or the things we hope are leading to a more hopeful day. but it can actually be a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. You just kind of like spurred my mind in a completely different direction in thinking about kind of biblical sabotage moments, but the mini moments, like the little moments that like Jesus experiences where his own mind is changed in like a moment. So like, let's say, I'm going to get the parable wrong, but there was someone that came in, a woman, and wanted to something. He kind of ignored her at the beginning, and then I think she spoke up, and then he was like, wait a second, actually, I should pay attention to this person. But it was in the context of, a lot of higher ups or something like that. Yes, the Syrophoenician woman, thank you. Like there are lots of moments in the Bible. I think it's an incredible experience of like seeing Jesus changes his mind about things a lot and in the moment. So like, it's not that like, he came in and he was just like, I know exactly the right way. It's like, no, he has to like show this sort of like change and adaptability. And in those little moments of like where he's accepted the Syrophoenician woman into this moment with these other people, like he's sabotaging those other people from their power relationship with her. So like, there are all of these different, all of these different stories. So anyway, I'll leave that there.
Yeah, and I'm thinking now into this place where sabotage is maybe our cue or a bit of our roadmap to finding this. If I come back to this metaphor of the clear path, that moments of sabotage popping up are the cue or the messaging that we're actually on the right path. That if it is completely clear, then it's maybe a road that's been walked before. So there's not areas there for us to innovate or change or make things new or renewed again. So I think this is, helpful framing for me for that if sabotage is coming up, and I think about that for my, like internally when I'm self-sabotaging, that maybe that's my cue, I'm on the right path myself, but also in community or shared spaces that we are on the right path. And then the question really is like, okay, so how do we come into deeper relationship so that this cue point becomes the learning place or the place of depth for us to grow deeper and to grow forward?
Wow, we're going there now, aren't we? God sabotages our best plans. Even Jesus gets sabotaged or recognizes he needs to be sabotaged by a Syrophoenician woman. This is amazing. so discernment, God as saboteur. The last three people have reminded me of something, Alexandra, you brought to the last meeting we were in, which is the productive zone of disequilibrium. It's one of the adaptive principles for leadership. And like, if God sabotages the status quo, if things are too comfortable, Spirit's going to mess it up. It's like, and yet, if anxiety gets too high, something else is needed to kind of bring it back down into a range where things can move ahead, where learning can happen, where some conciliation is needed to bring coherence, right? It's got to hang together. There's a principle, like in a united church, unity is, and I don't mean we all think the same thing, but the coherence of community is a necessary vessel for the Spirit to embody God's vision for the world. And so that for me, it's not just a practical strategy, it goes right to the heart of who we are as church. We can challenge each other, but we can't break that sense of common cause, the sense of oneness. And I've been thinking a lot lately that maybe a really core theological principle for us right now, for the world maybe, is the oneness of God. And I've just been challenged by how radical a statement that is. We can never other. We can never say that's outside of God, that person, that organization, that experience. Like, it's a challenging worldview. There's no us in them. Anyway, thank you for the God turn.
Thanks for that, Rob. And I think you're nicely pointing us towards maybe the place we'll come towards as our last sort of place to dig in today. Is, I guess, this question of like, then how do we mobilize, or how do we engage sabotage to bring it into oneness, to bring it closer, to make it part of what we're doing and being and trying to move towards in the world. Because I think my initial framing was like, okay, how do we cope with this? Which was this really kind of externalization of like, how do we deal with this bad thing? Yeah, exactly, this pushing away. But I'm in your reflection there, Rob. I'm like, oh, the question is actually, how do I bring this closer and deeper and more towards me to make this something that we mobilize, engage, or use? And I do not have an answer for that. And I don't expect anyone else here too, but that's maybe the thinking that I want us to maybe grapple with a bit towards the end here.
It makes me think a bit about uncomfortable zones, I guess. And like when you're experiencing sabotage, like, is there like really just kind of taking it in and like doing maybe a 5Y exercise or something that's like kind of really getting at like, what is the heart of our own discomfort with either somebody else sabotaging something or with us sabotaging something. And maybe that, like, you know, happens through conversation with somebody else that's kind of external to whatever sabotage is happening, that can shed light on it. Or maybe it's really, you know, going deep ourselves, being like, okay, actually, I need to have some hard truths with myself for a few minutes and just figure out like what is actually at the heart of this. And I keep coming back to this, you know, moment in my own life, I guess, recently when I decided to move, but there was a lot of things that happened like in the years that before that were very self-sabotaging in trying to like say, no, you know, like all of these things are going to change and like this is what's going to happen and these outcomes are going to be there. And, you know, like, but that intention to like allow the sabotage to take over, that like decision to not make a decision about the future is also like at the root of sabotage. And so it's like, okay, the world is going to continue changing and continue evolving, and our lives will continue changing and evolving, whether we like it or not. You know, friends will move away, family will move away, people will do all sorts of things in their life that are independent of you, and where you want them to be or what have you. So it's like really important to come back to the self and come back to your family or your community and be like, okay, well, actually at the heart of this, what are the barriers and like how big are they? And are they actually insurmountable? Or is it just that we need to have more coffee time with this one person every week and talk to them more, and have a relationship with them rather than just like sitting at the session table and being in conflict or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, and I think what I can hear echoed in my own story as you speak, Alexandra, is for me, it's this place of, I think, like coming into right relationship with myself and with other people. So like this is the bringing closer process, is like, where am I finding integrity with myself, that I'm being congruent and authentic, and then where am I finding that with other people, and that for me is like what's underlying this like place of how do we use sabotage? How do I make it something that brings us closer, or brings me closer to people and projects and ways of being, is through this like, what's off or what's not quite right in our relationship, and where can I tend to or heal those places in order to make the path clear.
Yeah, I'm reminded, sabotage, like any tension or conflict, tends to be experienced as polarized, right? Like two, for and against, us and them. And the trick is to find the third way to open up that space so that the 3 points become a sail, catch the winds of the spirit and move things forward. And I think spiritual practice is one of those strategies for finding a third space, a third way to open it up. And I'm just thinking of the wisdom of the sacraments, right? We've only got 2 in the United Church. Eat together, like share the table, and maybe it will look different. Pass the potatoes. I would say baptism, bathe together, but maybe not. Wash the dishes together. We'll go that far. But those intimate spaces of life that are basic to our well-being and are so healing when we do them together. But yeah, praying together, laughing together, eating together. This might be COVID longing speaking, but anyway.
This has been a really interesting conversation, the evolution of the topic as we've sort of moved through it, and some of the things that have been said recently about being open to sabotage as an opportunity, the us and them kind of mentality and how we bring it in. And I think, so for me, I'm in a situation work-wise where I'm dealing with an extraordinary amount of sabotage. It's rampant, and that's, as you said, is very polarizing. So I think, my next step on the journey to reconciliation with that sabotage and bringing it in and using it as a signal for an opportunity to change, or is, how do you name it? It's very easy to sabotage, I think, is often framed in this was done to me, or this was done to the project. It's a thing that you feel, and it's at an affront to your agenda, instead of seeing it as it's a signal that someone else has got a different opinion, or has a different point of view, or has a different context. And so for me, I think I need to start to work on naming, giving a new name to this sabotage. It feels like someone has sabotaged me personally. Well, what actually has happened, and then let's get curious about it, and let's ask some questions, and let's see if we can find that third perspective that Rob was talking about, to sail away on the winds of the spirit, as it were.
I think, and this is, I think, Tom, on that lovely line, to sail away on the winds of the spirit, is where we'll come to close for this particular conversation today. But I'm really grateful for everyone for your perspectives, your digging in and grappling around sabotage and all that it means and where it might take us. And I think we probably could do like a 3-part series on this. to really find our way through this. But grateful as always for some really helpful framing or thinking and offerings about how we move together as community and how we might move in new ways. So thanks folks for your time and energy today, and we'll see you all at the next conversation.